بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In last week's lesson we were looking at the ruling with regard to iqtida. And iqtida literally means to follow, and in the context of the Sharia, iqtida basically means the rules and the regulations which are applicable or which needs to be found when a person prays behind the imam, when a muqtadi or a musalli prays behind the imam. So what rules and what regulations, what are the conditions, what are the criteria? So this is something which we kind of started this last week's lesson, but it's something which we will continue in this week's lesson if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will. Now before we look at the text, what I'll do, I'll just mention some kind of ahadith, some kind of saying from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with regards to following, with regards to iqtida and praying behind the imam. And I will firstly begin with regards to some rulings which are applicable to the imam himself. And thereafter I will then mention some ahadith and some sayings which are applicable to the muqtadi and the follower. Now firstly, the hadith which we will look at is a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by Abu Qatada, that he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إني لأدخل في الصلاة. That Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم would say that I would enter the salah, i.e. I would start my salah and my prayer, وأنا أريد إطالتها, and I will have the intention to lengthen the salah and make the namaz and make the prayer as long as possible. فَأَسْمَعُ بُكَاءَ الصَّبِيِّ, then I would hear the cries of the children behind. فَأَتَجَوَّزُ فِي صَلَاتِي, thereafter I will then shorten and do taqseed. Taqseed literally means I will then shorten the prayers. مِمَّا أَعْلَمُ مِنْ شِدَّةِ وَجْدِ أُمِّهِ مِنْ بُكَائِهِ, because of the grief and the distress the mothers would be due to their, or because of their children. When they would hear their babies and their little children cry, so the kind of anxiety a mother feels, because of that reason Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would finish his salah off quickly, and instead of making it longer, he would hasten and try to finish it off as soon as possible. Now from this particular hadith in itself, we can derive that when the salah takes place, the imam first and foremost, he should not make the salah and the prayers too long. Something like say asr, say maximum around 10 minutes. Now if the imam is taking 20 minutes for asr, he's not actually doing something good. He's not actually doing something which is an act of taqwa, an act of piety, but instead he is going against the sunnah. The hadith which comes up later, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that when you are praying with congregation, with Jamaat, you should try to make the salah as short as possible. And then when you are praying salah by yourself, then make it as long as possible. But instead, in this day and age, we find the other way around. We find imams making the salah in congregation very, very long, and then the sunnah afterwards, in 1 minute they've gone. So that's the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you make the Jamaat salah in congregation short, and when you pray the sunnahs and the witr and the various other nawafils throughout the day, you try to make that long. So that is first and foremost, don't try to make the salah as long as possible. Now I don't mean that pray the asr within 2-3 minutes, no. Something which is reasonable. But it shouldn't be something which, goes over the limit, and something which takes 10 minutes to pray and takes 15 minutes to 20 minutes, then that is something which is wrong and something which is incorrect. However, it should be added here that if you are, say, for example, in a masjid, or if you are, say, in a community where they actually don't mind in the imam praying long salah, then in that situation to make the salah long, then that will be permissible. And a good example will be of Arab masajid. As we know that the Arab masajid, when, especially for their loud prayers, their Fajr, Maghrib and Isha, they tend to pray long surahs. So their Isha may take 15 to 20 minutes. So there's nothing wrong with that. Why? Because actually their community or their people actually don't mind in the salah being that long. So if that is the case, then there's nothing wrong with that. So this particular ruling is something which is based on the custom. Generally speaking, try to make the salah as short as possible. However, if the people don't mind, then to make it longer, there's nothing wrong with it. Now the next part of the hadith I'm going to mention is the things which the muqtadi and the followers should do when praying behind the imam. Now what the muqtadis and the followers should do is that when they are praying salah behind the imam, they should not do the action before the imam does the action. And it's mentioned in the hadith of Sahih Muslim that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, فَلَا تَسْبِقُونِي بِالرُّكُوعِ وَلَا بِالسُّجُودِ وَلَا بِالْقِيَامِ. That do not hasten before me in the ruku, in the sajda, in the prostration, وَلَا بِالْقِيَامِ, and not in the standing position. Before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the imam, before he would go into ruku, then the followers, they should not go into the ruku. Before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do the sajda and the prostration, then you should not go into the sajda. Before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stands up for the second rakat or the third rakat or the fourth rakat, then no one should stand before him. So first and foremost, when you are praying salah behind the imam, you should do it at the same time as the imam. Again, this is a very great mistake which many youngsters in particular, and sometimes some of the mature people as well, get this mistake that before the imam goes into ruku, we kind of already there. Or in particular, when the imam stands up after ruku and he's in the standing position, the qawma, where he's reciting Rabbana wa lakal hamd, then before the imam could say Allahu Akbar and go into sajda, you see many people actually kind of their back is already a bit bent and already ready to go for the sajda. Now this is something which is not minute, by the way. Don't think, oh, it doesn't matter if I just go before the ruku, before the imam in the ruku position or in the sajda position, because there is a hadith which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim, narrated by Sayyidina Abu Hurairah anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ama yakhsha alladhi yarfa'u ra'sahu qabla al-imam." That those people don't fear who go or who raise their heads before the imam does in ruku, أَيْ يُحَوِّلَ اللَّهُ رَأْسَهُ رَأْسَ إِمَامٍ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may turn their face into the face or head of donkey. Meaning that those who go into ruku before the imam, who do the sajda before the imam, then the wa'id or the severity which is being mentioned in this hadith is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He wants, He can actually turn them into donkeys. Obviously the scholars of hadith kind of commentated on this particular hadith. Some scholars have said that this hadith is, the metaphoric meaning is meant here. I.e. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not actually make them donkeys, literally, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put qualities or awsaf of donkeys in their heart. Now donkeys, what are they known for? That's why you sometimes say Urdu, gadahe, meaning hamakat, stupidity. So what will happen is that those people who do this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put stupidity in their hearts. Basically they will be like stupid, they will be like foolish people. That's why we see like some people just like acting daft and acting like stupid here and foolish here and there. It's because of, this could be one of the reasons that going into ruku, going into sajda before the imam does. And some of the scholars have viewed that this hadith is actually in its literal sense, i.e. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He could actually change them into donkeys. He could actually change them into donkeys. We call them metamorphosis, i.e. musk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will transform them into donkeys. Now you may then argue and say, well, isn't there a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there will be no kind of musk, there will be no kind of like transforming of one form to another in this ummah? The reply to that hadith will then be that before the end of time, there won't be ijtimai, a kind of communal musk, i.e. where the hadith says that there will be no musk, it means that the whole Muslim ummah won't be transformed from humans to animals. But there may be cases where individuals within a community, within a nation, who can be transformed into donkeys, who can be made into different species. And that's why the hadith, which is of Sunan al-Tirmidhi, where Rasulullah mentioned that before the end of time, when people will start listening to music openly, and when people will start drinking alcohol openly, committing zina, adultery openly, some of the ummah will be turned into musk, will be transformed into different animals, will be transformed into donkeys, will be transformed into pigs and into monkeys. It doesn't mean the whole Muslim ummah, it means certain individuals will be transformed. So even as in this hadith as well, that we shouldn't then think that, oh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to turn us into donkeys and so on. We should never ever underestimate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qudrat and power. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, then in the blink of an eye, He could turn us into donkeys, He could turn us into monkeys, He could turn us into swines, and you name it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do that. So what this hadith is saying is that very importantly that when we are praying salah, try to always pray salah behind the imam, and always try to do systematically with the imam or after the imam, but never ever before the imam. Another hadith which talks about here with regards to following the imam, which is very important, I'll just mention it here. I may come back to it later on in the lecture. And that is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that إِذَا أَتَى أَحَدُكُمْ الصَّلَاةِ, that when one of you comes to the salah and the prayer, وَالْإِمَامُ عَلَى حَالِهِ, and the imam is in a particular state. Now, particular state or hal here means that the imam, say, may be in the ruku position. He may be in the sajda position. He may be in the qawma position, which is after ruku, when you are saying Rabbana wa lakal hamd. The imam could be in any one of these positions. Now, what does the hadith say? فَلْيَصْنَعْ كَمَا يَصْنَعُ الْإِمَامِ. Do what the imam is doing. Now this again is a very great mistake which sometimes happens. Sometimes we come to the masjid and we're a bit late. So the imam is in sajda position. So you see many brothers, what they do is that they just stay at the back, drying themselves off the wuzu or putting their socks on or putting their coats on. And then they wait for the imam to start the next rakat, then they start the salah, Allahu Akbar. Whereas that totally goes against the hadith, because the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying is that whichever state you find the imam. So even though that rakat which you're joining, even though the imam is in sajda, that rakat which you are joining, it's not considered as you found the rakat, so you have to do qadha. But what I'm trying to say, and what this hadith is trying to say, is that whichever state you find the imam, you should come and join him straight away. So if the imam is in the first sajda, say Allahu Akbar and then join the imam in the sajda. Don't wait for the second rakat to start. Because that then goes against the hadith and the practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're saying that no, you should start or join the imam in whichever state you find him. فَلْيَصْنَعْ كَمَا يَصْنَعُ الْإِمَامِ. Do what the imam is doing. So this is again another kind of nasiha or advice which is being said to the muqtadi, who should do when he joins the imam and when he joins the salah. Now we're just going to have a look at the text here. Some of the rulings we kind of looked at in last week's lesson with regards to iqtida and following the imam. Now the text here goes on to say that وَلَا يُصَلِّي الْمُفْتَرِضْ خَلْفَ الْمُتَنَفِّلِ, that someone who is praying farz he cannot pray salah behind someone who is praying nafil. So I think I may have explained this ruling in last lesson. Basically, as I mentioned in the Hanafi fiqh, that the Imam and the Muqtadi, so the followers and the Imam, for the iqtida, for the following to be correct, the Imam either has to be, in status, has to be similar to that of the Muqtadi or higher. If the Imam is lower, then that salah of the Muqtadi will not be correct. So keeping this in mind, just say the Imam is praying Sunnah, or he's praying some kind of nafil prayers, and then a Muqtadi joins the Imam, and he makes the intention of Fard. Then that iqtida and that following will not be correct. Just an example, someone after the Maghrib Salah, he's starting his Sunnah, he's praying his Sunnah. So if somebody then comes and taps him on the back and says, he's gesturing like, okay, you're the Imam, I'm going to pray behind you, then that particular following would not be correct. Why? Because that person who's come late, he's probably praying Maghrib, and the person who is praying, or who's been the Imam, he's actually praying Sunnah. So obviously that following would not be correct, and such a following would not be allowed. Similarly goes on to say, وَلَا مَنْ يُصَلِّي فَرْضًا خَلْفَ مَنْ يُصَلِّي فَرْضًا. Similarly, if the Imam is praying one fard, and the Muqtadi makes the intention of another fard, again that salah will not be done, will not be correct. So just an example, if the Imam makes the intention of Zuhur and he's praying the Zuhur salah, and then somebody comes and then joins the Imam and he makes the intention of Asr, that salah is not going to be correct. Why? Because two different prayers. Or just say if the Imam is praying Asr, and the Muqtadi comes, the follower comes and he thinks, gets mistaken, says, obviously it could be possible saying in the winter, probably not in the summer, where there's a lot of gap between the Asr and the Zuhur. But just say, for example, in the winter he's still thinking, or it's Zuhur time, and he makes the intention of Zuhur and prays behind. So then again, that iqtida and that following will not be correct. So not only does the status of the salah has to be the same, also the exact namaz has to be the same as well for the following and iqtida to be correct. He then goes on to say, وَيُصَلِّي الْمُتَنَفِّلْ خَلْفَ الْمُفْتَرِضِ. However, someone who's praying nafil, he can pray salah behind an imam who is praying fard. And we'll look at this later. Just say, for example, the imam is praying his fard salah, like his fard isha, and then somebody has come who's already prayed his isha before. Just say he's prayed isha at another masjid where the isha started a bit earlier, or just say, for example, Allah, just say he prayed at home, and he's come to the masjid, and then he sees that the jamaat and the congregation is taking place for the isha. So what can he do is that he can actually join that congregation and make the intention of nafil and optional. So the imam is praying first, and the follower who is behind the imam, he is making the intention of nafil. That would be correct, and that would be allowed. Now I'm just going to elaborate on this masla which I've just kind of highlighted here. In the Hanafi fiqh, if you've already prayed salah at home or in another masjid, it's only in two prayers, and the two prayers are Dhuhr and Isha, where you can join the Jamaat and congregation again, and you will make the intention of nafil for the second salah you pray. So, misal ke taur par, for example, just say you read Dhuhr salah, say at the masjid, and just say their Jamaat is at 1:45. Now you've gone to another masjid, and their Dhuhr salah is at 2:15. Obviously in the Zuhur, in the summer, in the Zuhur and in the summer, they were saying that the salah tends to be a bit longer or a bit later in certain mosques. So just say in one mosque, they're praying Zuhur at 2:15, whereas you already prayed it at 1:45 in another masjid. Now if you've gone to that masjid, and they are just about to start with Zuhur, then you should pray and join that particular congregation. Okay, you should join that. And I'm just going to narrate a couple of hadiths to you. The reason I'm saying this is just to show the severity of not joining. Now, it's mentioned in a hadith. It's mentioned in a hadith which can be found in Sunan al-Nasai, that once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was praying a salah, or he was leading the congregation and the jamaat, when a person, his name was Mihjan, he was at the back of the masjid, at the back of the congregation, and he did not participate in the congregation and in the salah with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam finished, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said these words: "Ma mana'aka an tusalliya ma'an nas?" What stopped you from praying salah with the people? And listen to this: "Alasta bi rajulin muslim?" Aren't you a Muslim? These are the words Rasulullah saying to that person: "Aren't you a Muslim?" And even in afterwards, another hadith goes on to say, which can be found in Abu Dawud, where Rasulullah similar hadith, but this time uses the word alam tuslim, aren't you a Muslim? Now what I'm trying to say is that sometimes you go to some places where you just say, for example, especially in the winter for Isha, it happens, where, for example, certain mosques they try to, or they pray the Isha very early, like especially in the winter, Isha, starts at 5:30 in the afternoon or in the evening. So they pray the Isha, say, at 5:45 or at 6 o'clock. Whereas then some of the mosques, they obviously have the Isha really late at 8 o'clock. So what happens to some brothers is that they pray the Isha at 6 o'clock, then they go into say, a talk or a speech or a lecture in another mosque after Isha, and the Isha is starting, say, at 8 o'clock. And you see many of them just like, they pray the Isha, they're kind of relaxing at the back of the mosque, on their iPhones or on their phones, whatever, talking, having a good laughter and so on and so forth, and the Jamaat is going on. So in that case here, what these brothers should be doing and what is our responsibility is that if we see any brothers, we should actually tell them, "Come on brothers, let's come and pray Salah." And if they said that they prayed it, then you should remind them of this particular hadith. The stern words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that Jamaat is going on, even though you prayed it, but even though Jamaat is going on, congregation is going on, you should actually pray the Salah again. Okay, if you don't want to pray the Salah, then you shouldn't have attended the Jamaat and you shouldn't have attended the masjid. But because you've attended the masjid, so then it becomes, well, we won't say it's obligatory or first to pray, but it is a good practice that, and it looks good, where just say somebody, a late comer came, and then he sees the congregation, people are praying in the congregation, then he sees a few brothers at the back, on their iPhones or on their mobile phones or just looking at the internet, whatever. It doesn't really give a good picture. And also on top of that, you will then you yourself are actually creating someone to have ill feeling and have tuhmat about it. And Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi has mentioned a hadith in his Adab al-Mufrad that ittaqu mawabi'at tuham, which means that save yourself from people accusing you or making accusations or giving tuhmat about you. Tuhmat basically means like false accusations, where do not give people the opportunity and the window to actually say something against you or level an accusation against you. So if you've already prayed the Salah and the Jamaat is starting again, then in particular for Dhuhr and Isha, you should actually join that particular congregation and you should not loiter around at the back of the masjid. You should not hang around in the back of the masjid. Why? Because as I was telling you, that if a late comer would come, then you probably think what this person is doing. Like Jamaat is starting and he's like, relaxing at the back of the masjid. So it doesn't really look good. And also the hadith which I just highlighted from Sunan Nasa and Sunan Abu Dawud, the stern words of Rasulullah using such as Alasta bi rajuli Muslim, aren't you a Muslim, alam tuslim, aren't you a believer, these kind of words. So therefore we should try and pray the Jamaat again with the congregation, and the second Salah which we will read, that will be considered as nafal and that will be considered as optional. Besides then two prayers, the other three prayers, Fajr, Asr and Maghrib, then you should not pray behind the Imam again. If you've already prayed once, whether at home or whether in another masjid, and then you've gone to another place and the Jamaat is starting again, then you should not pray that Salah again. Now why shouldn't you do that? We're going to look at this the section which is coming up afterwards, that after you prayed your Fajr and after you prayed your Asr, it is makruh tahmeen is severely disliked to pray nafil prayers, optional prayers. So after Fajr to pray any optional prayers all the way up to sunrise, and after Asr to pray any optional prayers all the way up to sunset is makruh. Now if you've already prayed the Asr Salah in one masjid or at home, and you come to the masjid and they are doing the Asr Salah in congregation, then you should not participate in the Salah. Why? Because that second Salah will be optional, and as I've already said, optional Salah after Asr is makruh. And with regard to Maghrib Salah, then again, if you pray Maghrib, say, already at home, somewhere at home, or whether you're in the masjid, and you come to the masjid and just say there's a group of people who are doing the congregation of Maghrib, then again, you should not join them. And the main reason is because, as I said before, that the second prayer which you're going to pray, that is going to be considered as optional. And you can't have 3 rakat optional prayers. Okay? There has to be optional prayers, nafil, has to be in units of 2, 4, 6, 8 and so on. You can't pray like 1 rakat optional prayer, you can't pray 3 rakat optional prayer, you can't pray 5 rakat optional prayer. Okay, so these kind of optional prayers are not allowed. Obviously there is the exception of witr, which obviously the Hanafi we don't actually consider it to be optional, but we actually consider it to be wajib. That is, you could say, like a exception to the rule. But besides that, any other optional prayers, you can't have 3 rakat. So therefore, the conclusion of this particular ruling is that if you've already prayed the Salah for Dhuhr and Isha, you can join the congregation. However, for Fajr, for Asr and for Maghrib, then you should not join the congregation again. The next ruling here, Imam Quduuri rahmatullah goes on to say, وَمَنِ اقْتَدَى بِإِمَامٍ ثُمَّ عَلِمَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى غَيْرِ طَهَارَةٍ أَعَادَ الصَّلَاةِ. That whoever follows the Imam and then he finds out or he realizes that the Imam is not on Tahara, ala ghayri Tahara, meaning that the Imam has done something which according to his madhab, according to his school of thought, is actually naqid wudu, actually has broken his wudu. In that situation, a'ad salah, i.e. you cannot pray behind the Imam, but instead you will have to repeat the salah. Okay, now the broader issue from this particular text is whether, say, one group or one madhab or one school of thought, whether it is permissible for them to follow another school of thought in salah. So take an example of, can the Hanafi school of thought, someone who's a Hanafi, can he follow behind a Shafi Imam, say for example, or a Maliki Imam or a Hanbali Imam, whether that is allowed or not. Now, many of the issues between Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad, is based on what we call in Arabic furu ruling. Furu means not based on the principle, not based on aqidah or belief. It's just based on jurisprudence ruling. So when it comes to belief, the beliefs which Imam Hanifa rahmatullah has, the same beliefs Imam Malik has, and Imam Shafi has, and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal has. Why? Because they all come under the ambit of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So the belief, there's no problem. It's only in certain jurisprudence issues where there is the ikhtilaf and the difference. And to tell the truth, when you look at many of the differences, it's all based on what is better and what is not better, which in Arabic we call afdaliyah. Like for example, as I mentioned before, Imam Hanifa rahmatullah says that saying Ameen quietly is better, whereas Imam Shafi rahmatullah says that saying Ameen loudly is better. So it's not like, what I'm trying to say is, the rulings are not based on haram and halal, or on takfir, like you don't do this, you're a disbeliever. You know, it's not based on that. It's just based on what is preferable and what is not preferable. So therefore, when it comes to like rulings about salah and so on, obviously without any doubt, without any detestability, a Hanafi can pray salah behind a Shafi. Hanafi can pray salah behind a Maliki. He can pray salah behind Hanbali. There's nothing wrong with that. Even though if anybody has prayed salah behind the Shafi, you will know that they say Bismillah Rahman Rahim Nawi, and after they read Surah Fatiha, there's a gap. They actually be quiet for a few seconds, but not for a few seconds, a good 10 seconds or so, because as I already mentioned before, in their madhab, they say that muqtadis have to recite Surah Fatiha. So they give, say, 10-15 seconds in salah for the muqtadis to recite Surah Fatiha. And then they recite Bismillah Rahman Rahim Nawi, and then they pray salah. So whichever way they pray salah, it's not unlawful, it's not like haram or anything like that. So therefore, if a Hanafi was to pray salah behind the Shafi'i, then without any detestability, that salah will be valid and that salah will be accepted. Now the ruling here, or you could say the exception here, is this particular text here, where it says here that, however, if you have seen, and this is all based on whether you've seen or not, or whether you know or not, that if you have seen the Shafi'i Imam, say for example, has done something which contradicts the ruling or a ruling of the Hanafi school of thought, then you cannot pray salah behind him, and if you did, then you will have to repeat the salah again. And a good example here is that according to Imam Shafi rahmatullahi, again I mentioned this when we were looking at the Taharat section, according to Imam Shafi rahmatullahi, he says that if somebody bleeds, his wudu does not break. If somebody bleeds, flowing blood, according to Imam Shafi rahmatullahi, does not break your wudu. Flowing pus from a spot, that does not break your wudu. Whereas, even like vomit, that does not break your wudu according to Imam Shafi rahmatullahi. Whereas, according to Imam Hanifa rahmatullahi, as I mentioned many months ago, these things break the wudu. Now just say for example, if a Hanafi, he saw a Shafi'i Imam bleeding, like actually bleeding from his body. So what the Shafi'i Imam did was that he got a tissue, he just wiped it, and then the Iqamah started for Salah, and then he said, Allahu Akbar, and started Salah. Now obviously what he did was not wrong, because according to their jurisprudence, flowing blood does not break the wudu. But in the Hanafi fiqh it does. So therefore, in that situation, it would not be permissible for that Hanafi person to pray salah behind. Now this is, remember, as I mentioned, is when that person has seen it with his own eyes, the Shafi Imam doing something which goes against his mazhab and against his school of thought. Obviously, if he didn't know, like he bled a few minutes just before the Iqamah started, and he then started the Imam in the Salah or the congregation, in that situation, obviously, he's forgiven, and obviously the salah which he then subsequently prayed, that would be accepted. So that concludes the section with regards to iqtida and following. Now the next section which we're going to start talks about some certain things, or some things which are considered disliked and makruh in salah. So these things would not actually break the salah. That section, inshallah, we're going to look at probably next week, where certain things break the salah, about like talking or eating in salah, these things break the salah. So we're going to look at those things which actually is considered makruh and disliked in salah. So I'll have a read of the text, and wherever there is a hadith related to the ruling, inshallah I'll also mention that at the same time as well. Now the first ruling which the author has mentioned is that it is makruh and disliked for the musalli, for the prayer, for the musalli, anyone who's praying, whether it's the imam or the follower, أَيْ يَعْبَثَ بِثَوْبِهِ أَوْ بِجَسَدِهِ. That it is makruh for a person to play with his clothes or to play with his body in salah. I.e., when you are in salah, then you shouldn't be playing around with your beard. Should not be playing around with your hat. Should not be playing around with your vest or your jumper, or with your body. These kind of things. These things are considered makruh in salah. And obviously it is simple. Why is it makruh? Because remember this principle, that anything which diverts your attention from Allah, anything which diverts your attention away from the salah, that is makruh. That is disliked. So obviously even like, praying salah and then intentionally thinking about what you're going to do afterwards at home, what you're going to have for dinner, what you're going to have for lunch, and so on. So all these things are makruh. Obviously, with regards to, I'll just explain, if it comes, say, unintentionally, then it's not makruh. Okay, just for example, you're praying, you're trying your best to, show the devotion and so on, and then all of a sudden it just comes, some thoughts about worldly stuff or about home or anything comes. Now, when will it become disliked and makruh and impermissible and sinful in space? Is if you then continue thinking about it. After you realize that what am I doing is wrong, like I'm actually not concentrating in my salah, then if you then continue about it, and then think about it, or this is what I should do when I go home, or, these kind of things, then it becomes makruh. However, if you were thinking about it, then you remember, oh, I need salah, and then you try to take the thoughts away, and then you try to get the concentration back, then inshallah, those kind of thoughts which then come will be considered forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anyway, what I'm saying is that you play around with your clothes and your body, then that is considered makruh. Then the next ruling, the next thing which is considered makruh here, this doesn't really apply, say, when we are praying salah in the masjid or at home, but it can apply if we are praying, say, salah outside. And it's mentioned that وَلَا يُقَلِّبُ الْحَصَى إِلَّا أَلَّا يُمْكِنَهُ السُّجُودَ عَلَيْهِ فَيُسَوِّي مَرَّةً وَاحِدَةً, which means that when a person is doing sajda, he should not then move the pebbles and the stone away from the place of sajda. Okay? You should not move it away unless it is difficult for you to do sajda or to prostrate, where in that situation you will be allowed to use it but only once. So just an example, like you're praying salah outside and you're about to do sajda and there's like a big massive like a rock in front of you. Now it's going to be difficult for you to do sajda on that rock, or you may hurt your forehead. Then in that situation, if you were to just move it with your right hand to one side and do sajda, that will be permissible. And there's a hadith with regards to that, just mentioning, again, which can be found in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, narrated by Mu'aykib, who narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding a man, يُسَوِّ التُّرَابَ حَيْثُ يَسْجُدُ, who was moving the mud and the soil and the pebbles, حَيْثُ يَسْجُدُ, from the place where he was to do sajda. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him that in kunta fa'ilan fawahidatan, that if you want to do it, if you need to do it, then do it once. Okay, because you could just like move it with one hand, move it quickly, move the dirt, move the stone away. Because that can be done through one action, then only do it once. The next thing which is considered makruh here is wala yutabbiku asabi'a, which means do not crack your knuckles. Like in salah, to crack your knuckles. You go like this and so on in salah, then that is considered makruh. Now outside salah, if it is done with the intention of easing the pain from your fingers, then it's enough. Sometimes like when you are working or you are moving certain hard or heavy things, then your kind of fingers get a bit kind of, jagged and everything. So in that situation, if you were to like click your fingers, crack your knuckles, and it kind of gives you that, bit of ease at the end, that bit of kind of comfort. So if it's done with that intention outside salah, then it's allowed. But to do it in salah, then it is makruh. And the main reason for its accessibility, as I said, is because it kind of makes noises. It kind of makes noises, and when somebody makes these kind of noises, even not only you are disturbing yourself in salah, but you will also be disturbing other people, because other people who are trying to concentrate, when they hear that kind of noise, they'll think, or they lose their concentration. They start thinking, oh, who did this, who did that, and they kind of like lose their concentration. So not only you are diverting your concentration away from salah, but also other people as well. That's why it's considered makruh. Another thing which is considered makruh here is wala yatakhassar. Now there are different interpretations with regards to the word yatakhassar, and there's a hadith which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim as well, narrated by Abu Hurairah bin Anhu, who has said, Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam anil khasri fi salah. Now what does khasr mean? Now there's two interpretations regarding khasr. The most correct interpretation is to pray salah by placing your hand on your waist, like this. Which in Urdu we translate as kamar par haath rakhna. To place your hands on your kamar, which is your waist, like to place salat in that way. Remember, the main thing is the qiyam, that's first. So as long as you're standing, you are doing the farziyat of salah. Obviously we read before, the sunnah is to stand like this. And if somebody is to stand like this in salah, he's doing the farziyat of salah, he's doing the obligatory things of salah, but because he's standing in this particular posture, then it will be considered makruh tahrimi and severely disliked. Now, why is this particular posture considered severely disliked and makruh in salah? Now, one reason is, number one, is it is a posture of proud and arrogant people. Probably seen like pictures of like kings and so on. Remember, there's a picture of King Henry VIII in one of the books. He's standing like this. So these are like postures of like proud people, arrogant people, kings. They stand like this to show that they're kind of, I don't know, honored, if you want to call it. But it's like a posture of a proud person. So obviously, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can't really, show that you're proud because you're supposed to make ourselves humble. So that is one reason why it is considered unlawful and haram. Another reason is, it's mentioned in the books of hadith and also of historian accounts as well, that when Iblis, the accursed, when he was thrown out of Jannah and paradise, then when he was descending to this particular world, he descended in this particular posture and way. Like he was standing like this, to show that what he did to Adam alayhi salam, driving away from Jannah, was something good. So when he came to this world, he kind of descended in this particular way. And the third reason, which is mentioned in the hadith of Mishkatiyah, the reason why it's impermissible is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Al-ikhtisaru fi salah rahatu ahli nar," which means that in the fire of hell, those people who will be burnt and tortured in the fire of hell, who will be like bitten by various snakes and scorpions and serpents and so on, to get some kind of comfort and ease from their punishment, they will be standing like this. And sometimes you see people as well that when they've been running for a long period of time and they're tired, so when they stand like this, they kind of feel a bit more, a bit like comfort. So that's another reason why we shouldn't be standing in that particular way. Why? Because there is imitation. So when you look at, there's three reasons why. One is imitation of the Iblis, of the accursed Iblis. Number two, imitation of the people of hell. And number three, imitation of proud and arrogant people. So these are the three reasons why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that in salah we should not stand in that particular way. Inshallah, we'll just leave it there for this week. May Allah just see so few questions we said what with that one. صلى الله عليه وسلم محمد وعلى آله وصحبه